Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm Steve Lance. The Justice Department says former President Trump cannot request a special master because he unlawfully held classified documents. Documents Trump claims were already declassified. But how did Trump declassify them? NTD's Arlene Richards reports.
The Justice Department is again claiming that former President Trump is obstructing justice. The department made the accusation in its recent response to Trump's request for a special master to review documents seized from his Florida home. At the core of the department's response is an allegation that Trump withheld classified documents. Trump has maintained that he declassified the documents during his presidency. I spoke to John Malcolm of the Heritage Foundation to find out the protocol for how a sitting president declassifies documents. Is there a protocol that a sitting president must follow in order to declassify documents?
No, I don't believe so. So there are various statutes that set forth the procedure for how documents get classified and declassified. But the Supreme Court in a 1988 case, Department of Navy versus Egan, said that the president's authority to classify and declassify documents doesn't come from a statute. It comes from the Constitution and his authorities under Article 2 as Commander-in-Chief.
He said there's no procedure set out in the Constitution for how a president can declassify documents. He explained how it could have been done.
Now, the prudent thing, of course, to do is to document when a president declassifies a document so that there's no question that he did so. That hasn't happened here, at least no document's been presented to date. So that creates a factual question about whether President Trump did, in fact, declassify these documents while he was still president.
Malcolm said in other instances during his presidency, Trump ordered that records be declassified, and then they were published.
The Supreme Court has said that a president has that authority as Commander-in-Chief under Article 2 of the Constitution, and in the same way that he has the pardon power and can just say, I pardon you, once he exercises that authority, he has exercised that authority, whether it is reduced to writing or not.
The Trump team is expected to have submitted a reply today, and a hearing has been set for Thursday. Arlene Richards, NTD News, New York.
In a new memo, the Justice Department reminds its employees, including FBI employees, not to talk with Congress. This comes as the FBI enters a sensitive time with whistleblowers alleging bias in critical investigations. NTD's Iris Tao has more.
Do not talk to Congress. That's the message carried in a Tuesday memo that Attorney General Merrick Garland sent to DOJ employees. The memo reiterates the department's policy of prohibiting communication with members of Congress, citing a provision that says, quote, no department employee may communicate with senators, representatives, or congressional staff without approval by the Office of Legislative Affairs. The provision further adds that DOJ employees should immediately pass on all congressional inquiries. The department-wide reminder comes in the wake of stunning whistleblower disclosures. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley revealed in a letter to FBI leadership this month that numerous whistleblowers have approached his office, alleging, quote, a deeply rooted political infection that has spread to investigative activity into former President Trump and Hunter Biden. That's adding him saying that the DOJ
has a history of failure of being transparent to the United States Congress.
Garland insists in the memo that the policy is not intended to limit whistleblower protections. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Tom Cotton wrote to DOJ employees, no matter what the memo says, you are protected by federal law if you contact my office to blow the whistle. Reporting by Iris Tao, NTD News.
Mikhail Gorbachev died on Tuesday. President Biden said he was a man of remarkable vision who had the courage to change course after the Soviet Union was devastated by decades of communism. The cost of busing illegal immigrants from Texas to D.C. and New York City has been released. The Texas Division of Emergency Management told the El Paso Times that the agency has paid over $12 million transporting illegal immigrants. The busts were processed and released by the federal government into Texas border communities. The cost equates to about $1,300 per person, Over 9,000 illegal immigrants have been bused from the border state to D.C. and New York. This is part of Governor Abbott's initiative to bring attention to what he calls the Biden administration's open border policies. Elections are costing more and more in America. Big campaign bucks is playing a decisive role in our politics. How damaging is it, and where are we heading? I discussed with Dr. Dan McMillan from Save Democracy in America. Dan McMillan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Steve. Good to be with you.
Dan, with the consequential midterms upon us, I'd like to ask you about gerrymandering, not something you hear about every day. So first, if you could just tell us exactly what it is and where the line between gerrymandering and redistricting lies.
Well, gerrymandering is basically politicians get into office and then they get to choose the voters they need to stay in office rather than the voters choosing them. And gerrymandering is just the process of every 10 years after the census, we redraw all the electoral districts for state legislatures and for the House of Representatives, because every district is supposed to have the same number of people so that you get the one person, one vote principle. The problem, however, is that where's the line between legitimate redistricting and partisan gerrymandering for partisan advantage? I don't know that anyone's found that, other than to say that we crossed it quite a long time ago. Both parties have done it always to some degree, and now, according to the Cook report, there are only, out of the 435 districts in the House, there are only 33 that are considered genuine toss-ups, and another 22 that are considered remotely competitive, which means that really you're talking about 90% of the incumbents are basically in safe districts, in safe seats.
Dan, there's another topic I want to discuss with you. When these elected officials actually do make their way to the Capitol in Washington, they say money is the root of all evils. When it comes to money in politics, your organization, Save Democracy in America, really tries to highlight this fact. What should the American people be aware of?
Well, what I think is that, money has played a decisive role in our politics. The federal elections of 2020, that is White House and Congress, individuals and pressure groups, corporations spent $14.5 billion. That was in constant dollars more than twice the cost of the 2016 elections. It's now to the point where members of Congress typically spend 30 hours a week on the phone raising money for the next election rather than doing their jobs. And what this means, it's basically destroyed, it's made a complete mockery of the principle of government by the people in our country. I mean, the damage, you could already see the damage in the 1980s, but it's gotten to a point now, among other things, you can't bring up in a campaign and you can't bring up in office any policy idea that would be unattractive. Forget even something that would anger donors. Even something that's unappealing to donors is a bad idea, because you're not a serious candidate. The media won't take you seriously if already before the primary you haven't raised money up to a very high bar, like say for a House race, at least $500,000. And consequently, more and more, any solution to the country's problems is automatically off the table. To take, for example, just health care, we pay more than twice as much per person in this country as people pay, as other countries pay for health care, like France or Canada or whatever. Yet we have a lower life expectancy, and 1 American in 10 has no insurance. Part of the problem is drug manufacturers who throw tons of money at Congress see to it that we're not allowed in this country to regulate drug prices the way every other country does, so Americans pay twice as much for medicine as other people and often go bankrupt trying to pay for medications they need. Health insurance companies are always looking for excuses to deny coverage and are micromanaging doctors.
So it sounds like, this is actually a bipartisan issue in the sense that regardless of which party you belong to, you essentially enter this apparatus in Washington once you're elected.
That's exactly right. It is completely a bipartisan problem. And also, I want to say that The donors who give the money, the politicians who take the money, Steve, these are not evil people. These are patriotic Americans, just like you and I and everyone in our audience. They're doing what they have to do. If you're a wealthy Republican and you don't lay a lot of cash on the Republican Party, you know that Democratic donors will control our government. If you're a wealthy Democrat, you're in the same boat. If you're a politician, fundraising is just part of the job. If you don't have stomach for big ticket fundraising, don't go into politics. So the problem is not the people in our politics. The problem is just the perverted incentives of a money-driven system. And it's not something that any of us chose. It's just the Supreme Court made a bad decision in 1976. A few other things happened in the way that politics is done. The money has a dynamic of its own. And I can't say it strongly enough. Our fellow Americans are not the enemy. The money and only the money is our enemy. And it's the enemy of us all.
Dan McMillan, Save Democracy in America. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much.
Mikhail Gorbachev died on Tuesday. President Biden said he was a man of remarkable vision who had the courage to change course after the Soviet Union was devastated by decades of communism. Senator Joni Ernst named China as America's #1 adversary during a speech on the direction of the Republican Party last week. Ernst said that the Chinese Communist regime is expanding its sphere of influence globally by providing loans to many countries, including Panama.
If this key shipping lane was handed over to our #1 adversary, I hate to even imagine the long-term economic and security impacts that would have on our American farmers, our businesses, and our families.
She said that if China were to take over Taiwan, the U.S. would lose our top producer of chips and semiconductors.
So if China were to invade and take Taiwan, then again, you can say goodbye to that new iPhone 25 or, whatever the latest version would be, or the basic household appliances and electronics.
The senator pointed out that the rare earth minerals used to make phones and electric cars were sourced from slave labor in communist China. She's also calling for the U.S. to go back to energy independence. And she said America must lead through a position of strength. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.